You sit in a cold leather chair in a bright, sterile examination room, looking at a plastic model of a human joint or an organ on the doctor's desk. The surgeon sitting across from you is speaking confidently, drawing diagrams on a piece of paper, explaining how a specific procedure is going to clear out the rust, replace the worn out parts, and get you back to living the way you did 20 years ago. It sounds incredibly logical. It sounds just like taking a car into the shop to get a new alternator or a fresh set of brake pads. You sign the paperwork, assuming that modern medicine is just advanced mechanics, and you trust that when you wake up from the anesthesia, the problem will be entirely fixed. I know exactly how comforting that promise is because I operated under that exact assumption for most of my adult life. My name is Harold Bennett. I'm 81 years old. I grew up in Columbus, Ohio, in a working-class neighborhood where folks viewed their bodies the exact same way they viewed the machinery at the manufacturing plants where they worked. If a part broke, you ignored the pain as long as you could, and when it finally failed completely, you went to the hospital to have a man in a white coat cut it out or bolt in a replacement. I spent my career in community health education trying to help folks understand their medical options in plain language. Now, living alone here in Scottsdale, Arizona, after losing my wife Margaret a few years ago, I spent a lot of time observing the quiet realities of getting older. And the hardest reality to accept is that after a certain age, your body is no longer a car. It is a delicate, interconnected ecosystem, and treating it like a machine shop is the fastest way to lose your independence entirely. The shift in my understanding did not happen in a classroom. It happened right here in my neighborhood. I had a good friend named Arthur who lived 3 houses down. Arthur was 76, a retired postman who still walked his golden retriever a mile every single morning. He developed a severe pain in his lower abdomen and was told he needed a major digestive surgery. On paper, Arthur was perfectly healthy for his age. His heart was strong, his blood work was clean, and the surgeon told him it was a routine operation. The surgery itself took 2 hours, and the doctor came out and told Arthur's family it was a complete technical success. But Arthur never walked his dog again. He spent 5 weeks in the hospital dealing with sudden confusion, lung infections, and a terrifying loss of muscle. When he finally came back to our street, he was in a wheelchair, frail and completely disoriented. The surgery had fixed the specific problem it was designed to fix, but the process of the surgery had completely destroyed Arthur. I could not understand how a successful operation could ruin a man. A few weeks later, my son Daniel flew down from Denver to visit me. Daniel works as a physical therapist, and he spends his days inside rehabilitation facilities trying to help older folks get back on their feet after major medical events. We were sitting on the porch, and I told him what happened to Arthur. I told him it felt like the hospital had somehow made a mistake. Daniel shook his head, looked out at the street, and told me that the hospital did not make a mistake. He said the system worked exactly the way it was designed to work. The problem is that the system is built for 40-year-old bodies. And when you put an older body through that same process, you walk right into a massive circulation trap. Daniel broke it down for me like a mechanic explaining a failing pump. He said there are 3 specific types of surgeries that doctors routinely perform on older adults that are sold as solutions, but are actually traps that devastate our internal plumbing. The first one he warned me about was major elective joint replacements, especially hips after a certain age. When you are 50, a new hip gives you your life back. But when you are closer to 80, the math changes completely. Daniel explained that the moment they put you under heavy anesthesia and lay you flat in a hospital bed, your entire circulatory system stagnates. Older muscles naturally lose their mass at a slow, steady rate. But when you are bedridden after a major trauma like having a bone sawed and replaced, your body loses muscle at an alarming, catastrophic speed. Those leg muscles are the secondary pumps that push blood back up to your heart. When they waste away in a hospital bed, your circulation pools. You become vulnerable to blood clots, the fatigue becomes unbearable, and standing back up requires a level of energy your engine simply can no longer produce. The The second trap involves major abdominal surgeries, the kind where they cut into your digestive tract to remove a blockage or repair an ulcer. The core of your body is the main power plant. When a surgeon cuts deeply into that area, your body recognizes it as a massive, life-threatening crisis. It takes every ounce of emergency resource, every drop of oxygenated blood, and diverts it to the wound to try and survive. The rest of your system is left starving. Daniel told me about the cascade effect he sees every day. The surgery limits your mobility. The immobility causes fluid to build up in your lungs. The fluid becomes pneumonia. The pneumonia requires heavy antibiotics, and the antibiotics completely destroy your gut, leaving you malnourished. The original surgical wound heals, but the rest of the engine rusts out from the inside. The third procedure we talked about was heavy elective spinal surgeries. As we age, our spines compress and ache. A doctor might offer a spinal fusion to relieve the pain. But Daniel pointed out that it is not just the cutting that destroys an older adult. It is the chemical fog of the anesthesia. My daughter Laura, who is a registered nurse in Phoenix, had mentioned this to me before. She told me that the heavy sedatives they use to put you to sleep do not leave an older brain the same way they leave a younger one. The chemicals alter the blood flow in your brain for hours. For a lot of folks our age, that alteration triggers a profound state of delirium. You wake up and you do not know where you are. The confusion leads to agitation. The agitation leads to the nurses giving you more sedatives. And the cycle spirals until you lose a piece of your cognitive function that you never get back. I sat on the porch listening to Daniel, and I realized that I had spent my whole life assuming that if a doctor offered a surgery, it was automatically the only path forward. We never stop to ask what the recovery will actually cost us. We assume that surviving the operating table is the only hurdle, without realizing that the hospital bed itself is the hardest environment an aging body can possibly endure. It is loud, it is bright, it interrupts your sleep, and it forces you to remain perfectly still while your muscles melt and your circulation slows to a crawl. We do not have to accept the knife as the default answer. Daniel told me that there are almost always alternatives, but you have to be brave enough to look the surgeon in the eye and ask for them. You have to ask about conservative management. You have to ask about aggressive physical therapy, tailored pain management, or adapting your home to accommodate your physical limits. You might have to accept that your knee is going to ache or your back is going to be stiff and choose to manage it from the outside rather than risking your mind and your independence on an operating table. Sometimes a localized injection and a walking cane are infinitely better than a perfectly placed piece of surgical titanium and a permanent spot in a nursing facility. After 60, the little things are what matter most. The body does not ask twice in the same way. It warns you with aches, it warns you with stiffness, and it warns you that it no longer has the raw power to endure massive trauma and bounce back. You might be sitting there looking at a surgical brochure, believing that if you just agree to the operation, you will feel like a younger version of yourself again. You might feel pressured to simply nod your head and sign the consent form. You still have time to step back and ask the hard questions. The independence we want to keep tomorrow is protected in the small, quiet habits we build today. And sometimes the most important habit is learning to say no to an intervention your body cannot handle. Do not let anyone rush you into a circulation trap without demanding to know exactly what the recovery is going to steal from you. Ask about the physical therapy. Ask about managing the problem from the outside. I am going to go head outside for my evening walk while the neighborhood is still quiet. Take care of yourself.